Saturday, the 20th of November, 2021. 6 o'clock in the evening. In Plymouth, England, an 18-year-old girl got dressed, picked up her phone, and walked out the front door. She was going to meet friends. She never arrived. Her family started calling around later that night. No answer. Her friends hadn't seen her. Her phone had gone silent. By the time Devon and Cornwall Police were brought in, one fact was already becoming impossible to ignore. Bobbi-Anne McLeod had vanished somewhere between her front door and a bus stop on Leigham Vale Road. And in 4 days that would change Plymouth forever, investigators would discover not just what had happened to her, but who had done it. And that discovery? Nobody saw it coming. Before anything else, you need to know who she was. Not the case. Not the headline. The person. Bobbi-Anne McLeod was 18 years old. Plymouth born and raised. The kind of city where you know the streets because you grew up on them, where communities have long memories and close ties, where the sea is always somewhere at the edge of things. Everyone who knew her describes the same quality. She was warm. She was bubbly. She walked into a room and made it feel more alive. Her mother, Linda McLeod, would later speak about Bobbi-Anne publicly, and when she did, she spoke with the specific, devastating precision of someone who knew her daughter completely. Not as a story. As a person. She had sisters. She had close friends. She had the full texture of a life that was just beginning to expand into something bigger. She was 18. And 18 is a very particular age. It's the year everything opens up. First real freedoms. First nights out without anyone waiting for you to come home. First plans that are entirely, completely your own. Bobbi-Anne was right at that threshold. On the evening of Saturday, the 20th of November, she made a plan. Simple plan. She was going into Plymouth city centre to meet friends. She got ready. She left the house. She walked to the bus stop on Leigham Vale Road. And somewhere between that bus stop and the moment her family knew something was wrong, the evening turned into something else entirely. The question of exactly what happened at that bus stop would drive the investigation that followed. And the answer would take Devon and Cornwall Police into territory that nobody expected. Leigham Vale Road. Honecknull. Northwest Plymouth. Residential streets, rows of houses, the quiet rhythm of a city neighborhood on a Saturday evening. The kind of area where you don't think about danger. You don't think about it because there's no reason to. You're home. You're local. You're waiting for a bus you've probably caught 100 times before. Bobbi-Anne was at the bus stop on Leigham Vale Road. She was heading into the city centre. She never got there. At some point that evening, her phone went silent. That's the first indicator that something had gone wrong. Not a missed call. Not an unanswered text. The signal simply stopped. In 2021, when an 18-year-old's phone goes dark, it isn't nothing. It's a signal that cuts through everything. Her family recognized it immediately. They started checking. Called her friends. Called around. Tried to reach her. Nothing. And the longer the nothing went on, the clearer it became that this wasn't a flat battery. This wasn't a change of plans. This was something else. When Bobbi-Anne's disappearance was reported to Devon and Cornwall Police, the investigation that launched was not slow or tentative. It was immediate. Because the details didn't add up. And investigators already suspected that what had happened on Leigham Vale Road that evening was worse than anyone was yet willing to say aloud. Within hours of the missing persons report, Devon and Cornwall Police had officers deployed across the Leigham area. CCTV footage was being pulled from cameras across the neighborhood, junctions, shops, bus routes. Every angle that covered that bus stop and the roads surrounding it. Phone data was being requested from mobile networks. The public was brought in fast. Bobbi-Anne's photograph was shared across social media, local news, community groups. Her description went out across the region. Plymouth responded. The city mobilized quickly. Neighbors, friends of friends, strangers who saw the post and felt the pull of it. People retracing routes, checking in with each other, scanning their own memories for anything that might be useful. But even as the public search spread outward across Plymouth, the investigation's most important work was happening in a room somewhere: investigators, screens, footage, data. Frame by frame. Because CCTV investigations are not what people imagine them to be. They're not a single dramatic moment where the killer walks clearly into shot. They're hours, days, footage from dozens of cameras, cross-referenced, time-stamped, mapped against the known timeline of where Bobbi-Anne was and where she needed to be. At first, nothing was definitive. Traffic moving through Leigham on a Saturday night. Headlights. Pedestrians. The ordinary visual noise of a city evening. But the investigators kept watching. Because somewhere in that footage, somewhere in the hours of ordinary-looking footage from an ordinary-looking Saturday, was the moment the evening stopped being ordinary. And they were going to find it. The search went public. The search widened. Days passed without resolution. 1 day. 2 days. 3. The family lived inside those days in a way that has no clean description. Hope that doesn't disappear so much as it changes shape, becoming something harder, and more desperate, and more painful with every hour. And then, on Wednesday, the 24th of November, 2021, the search found something. Not what they had hoped for. Not even close. South Hams. Devon coastline, south of Plymouth. If you've never been, picture this: cliffs, woodland, exposed headland. The kind of landscape that sits at the far edge of the map, remote enough that a person could drive there on a dark November night and see almost nobody. Near Bovisand beach, in that woodland, a body was discovered. It was confirmed to be Bobbi-Anne McLeod. She was 18 years old. She had been murdered. When that confirmation came, when the word moved out from the police statement into the city and then the country, something shifted. The possibility that the story might end differently collapsed. Plymouth grieved in the way cities grieve when a young woman is taken from them. Not loudly at first. Quietly. The kind of grief that settles into streets and houses and sits there. And inside the investigation? The case changed shape completely. This was no longer a missing persons inquiry. It was a murder. And Devon and Cornwall Police already knew something that hadn't been made public yet. They already had a name. Here is where the investigation pivoted. The CCTV footage from the Leigham area had been reviewed exhaustively. Investigators had been watching traffic, pedestrians, the movements of a Saturday evening across Plymouth's northwest residential streets. And then, something caught their attention. A vehicle, appearing in footage near Leigham Vale Road at the relevant time. That vehicle became the thread the investigation pulled. Because CCTV networks in British cities are more extensive than most people realize. They don't just cover town centers and main roads. They cover junctions, petrol stations, bus routes, the access roads that lead out of the city southward, toward the coast, toward South Hams, toward Bovisand. If a vehicle moves through Plymouth on a Saturday evening, there is a very good chance that movement can be traced. And traced it was. Alongside the CCTV work, phone data was being mapped. The movement of mobile signals through the network, which master device pings, when, in what direction it moves, creates a trail. Not perfect. Not GPS precise. but compelling when layered over CCTV evidence and cross-referenced against a known timeline. The picture was assembling itself. And it was assembling around one specific person. Devon and Cornwall Police did not make that name public immediately. But internally, the investigation had arrived somewhere decisive. The evidence wasn't pointing toward a stranger who had drifted into Plymouth from somewhere else. It wasn't pointing toward someone on the margins. It was pointing toward someone who already lived there. Someone Plymouth would recognize. And nobody was ready for who it was. His name was Cody Ackland, 24 years old. From Plymouth. He played guitar in a local band called Rakuda, a Plymouth-based group with a presence in the city's music scene. The kind of young man you'd see at a rehearsal space, or behind a guitar at a small venue, or in the background of someone's social media posts. No criminal record. Read that again. No prior criminal record. No history of violence in the system. No flags. No alerts. No moment where the machinery of law enforcement had touched him and found something dangerous. To everyone around him, Cody Ackland was just a local musician in his mid-20s. He was not on anyone's radar. And that, in its own quiet way, is one of the most disturbing details in this entire case. Because the evidence, the CCTV, the phone data, the forensic material recovered at Bovisand and along the route south, placed Cody Ackland at the center of everything. It placed him near Leigham Vale Road on the evening of November the 20th. It traced his vehicle on the route south toward Bovisand. It connected him, through physical forensic evidence, to Bobbi-Anne McLeod. Devon and Cornwall Police arrested him. The arrest came in the same window as the discovery of Bobbi-Anne's body, the two events converging in a way that left Plymouth barely enough space to process one before the other landed. She had been found. The man suspected of killing her was in custody. The city that had spent 4 days hoping for a different outcome now had to hold both of those facts simultaneously. And a question settled over Plymouth that would not go away for a long time. How does someone with no criminal history, no known prior violence, no flag in any system, how does someone like that end an 18-year-old's life at a bus stop on a Saturday evening? It's a question the legal process would only partly answer. But it would try. Before we get to the courtroom, Plymouth did something that matters to this story. Plymouth gathered. Flowers appeared at the bus stop on Leigham Vale Road. Not just a few. Many. Wrapped in cellophane against the November cold, with handwritten notes attached. Candles that people kept relighting when the wind took them. People came who had never met Bobbi-Anne McLeod. They came because they had stood at bus stops. Because they had been 18 years old. Because the proximity of this, the plain, ordinary, terrifying proximity, was impossible to dismiss. She wasn't in a car late at night on an empty road. She wasn't in a situation anyone would describe as high risk. She was standing at a bus stop in her own city. And still. Vigils spread through the streets. Young women came. Mothers came. Strangers stood together in the dark and affirmed, without needing to say it out loud, that this was not acceptable. That Bobbi-Anne McLeod was not acceptable as a statistic. That she was a person. The year 2021 had already done something particular to Britain's relationship with this kind of grief. 8 months before Bobbi-Anne disappeared, a 23-year-old woman named Sarah Everard had vanished while walking home in South London. Her killer turned out to be a serving Metropolitan Police officer. The shockwave from that case was still moving through British public life when Bobbi-Anne McLeod stood at a bus stop in Plymouth. The conversations about women's safety in public space. The vigils. The anger. None of it had resolved. And then this. The flowers at the bus stop were grief. But they were also something harder. A refusal. Cody Ackland was charged with murder. He was remanded in custody. The case moved through the English legal system toward Plymouth Crown Court. For Bobbi-Anne's family, the months between the arrest and the court date were not empty time. They were the hardest kind of waiting, the kind where you already know the truth, and you are waiting for an institution to stand up and say it. That moment came in April 2022. 5 months after the 20th of November. The evidence against Cody Ackland had become overwhelming. Cody Ackland stood in the dock at Plymouth Crown Court. He entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder. A guilty plea. For Bobbi-Anne's family, this meant something specific and important. There would be no trial. No weeks of contested testimony. No process designed to challenge and undermine every fact of what happened. They would not have to sit through that. That is not closure. There is no closure in this story. But it is the avoidance of one particular cruelty. In the court proceedings, the prosecution presented what the investigation had built. Cody Ackland had been near Leigham Vale Road on the evening of the 20th. He had encountered Bobbi-Anne McLeod. He had attacked her. He had then driven south, out of Plymouth, through the darkening Devon landscape, down to the remote woodland near Bovisand. And he had left her there. The forensic and digital evidence underpinning that account was, by any measure, overwhelming. CCTV footage, phone data, physical evidence at Bovisand and along the route. The movements of his vehicle, traceable across Plymouth's camera network. This was not a case built on inference or circumstance. It was precise. It was documented. And it was why Cody Ackland, when faced with it, said guilty. What the court heard, and what the evidence confirmed, is that this was a random attack. There was no established relationship between Cody Ackland and Bobbi-Anne McLeod that explains what happened. No history. No connection. No prior interaction that placed her in his life in any documented way. She was at a bus stop. He was in the area. He attacked her. She was 18 years old. The randomness of it is the part that never settles. Not for Plymouth. Not for anyone who has followed this case. Because it means there was nothing Bobbi-Anne could have done differently. No alternative route. No precaution. She was living her life. And Cody Ackland decided that was enough. Plymouth Crown Court, May 2022. His Honor Judge Robert Linford presiding. Bobbi-Anne's family were in that courtroom. They had prepared victim impact statements, and if you have never read a victim impact statement from the family of a murder victim, understand what they are. They are the only moment in the entire legal process where the person who was killed is allowed to exist as a person. Not as evidence. Not as a charge. Not as a case number. As a daughter. As a sister. As someone whose absence has permanently altered the shape of every day that follows. Linda McLeod and her family addressed the court. Their words, reported publicly, described Bobbi-Anne with the specificity that only love makes possible. The warmth of her. The way she existed in the world. The gap she has left. The courtroom held those words. Judge Robert Linford sentenced Cody Ackland to life imprisonment. Minimum term, 31 years. He was 24 years old. 31 years means Cody Ackland will not be eligible for parole consideration until his mid-50s at the earliest. The judge's remarks left no ambiguity about the nature of the crime, a predatory, random attack on a young woman who had done nothing to provoke it, who had simply existed in a public place. Outside the court, Plymouth was there. Not loudly. Quietly. As the city had been throughout, present, grieving, refusing to look away. Justice, in the formal sense, had been done. A man had been convicted. A sentence had been handed down. And none of it, not a single year of it, would give Bobbi-Anne McLeod back. The investigation moved fast. Within hours of the missing persons report, CCTV footage was being pulled, phone data was being requested, officers were deployed across Leigham. The decision to go public quickly, the appeal, the photograph, the call for witnesses, kept the case visible and maintained pressure when it mattered most. The forensic picture assembled across multiple streams: CCTV, phone data, physical evidence at Bovisand, the vehicle trace. Each strand reinforcing the others until the picture was irrefutable. That is the work that produced a guilty plea. That is the work that produced a life sentence. But this case also leaves something unresolved. Cody Ackland had no criminal record. No flag. No warning. No moment where the system had identified him as dangerous. He moved through Plymouth as an ordinary young man, because as far as any external measure could tell, that is exactly what he was. That reality sits beside the severity of what he did. And it is deeply uncomfortable. Because it means the question of how we identify violence before it happens, the question the criminal justice system has never adequately answered, remains open. Bobbi-Anne's family have not gone quiet. In the time since the sentencing, Leigham McLeod and those who loved Bobbi-Anne have continued to speak her name publicly, not to extend a news cycle, but to insist on what matters. That she is remembered as a person. Not a case. Not a cautionary tale. A daughter. A sister. A friend. Someone who was warm and bubbly and full of life and who deserved every single day of the future she was owed. In England and Wales, an average of around 2 women are killed by a male partner or former partner every week. That chronic, relentless toll of domestic violence runs underneath British public life like something most people have learned not to look at directly. But Bobbi-Anne's case cuts a different way. She wasn't killed in a domestic context. She was killed at a bus stop. By a stranger. In her own city. On a Saturday evening. That specific fact, the ordinary, undefended nature of it, is what made Plymouth gather at that bus stop with candles. What made the case move nationally. What made women across Britain read the headline and feel the recognition of it, the particular, exhausting recognition of a risk they have managed and planned around and absorbed their whole lives. Bobbi-Anne McLeod wasn't taking a risk that night. She was catching a bus. Cody Ackland is serving life. 31 years minimum. That is what the law can do. It cannot undo the 20th of November. It cannot restore the Saturday evenings Bobbi-Anne will never have. But it is the formal, public, legally binding acknowledgement that what happened to her was wrong. And that the person who did it will spend decades in a cell for it. On Saturday evenings in Plymouth, buses still run along Leigham Vale Road. The stop is still there. Young women still stand at it. Phones in hand. Plans made. Looking down the road for headlights, for the bus that is going to take them where they want to go. They should be able to do that. Without fear. Without calculation. Without the quiet, exhausting arithmetic of risk that women perform so automatically, in so many cities, on so many evenings, that it has almost stopped feeling like anything at all. Bobbi-Anne McLeod stood at that stop on a Saturday in November. She was 18 years old. She was warm and kind and loved. She was on her way to meet her friends. She was, in every way that matters, exactly where she was supposed to be. She never made it onto that bus. Her name was Bobbi-Anne McLeod. She was 18 years old. She never made it onto that bus.
Her final journey was done in style. 4 horses led Bobbi-Anne McLeod's funeral procession this morning, cheered all the way through the streets of Leigham. The 18-year-old's sudden disappearance on a Saturday evening last November shook this community and the city as a whole. 6 months on, the investigation into her murder now complete, and the culprit behind bars, today was a chance to say goodbye. As the hearse arrived at St Andrew's Church in the city centre, more well-wishers stood together. Many wore T-shirts with the names of rock bands, something Bobbi-Anne was passionate about. Her coffin was taken inside, and then there was a moment of quiet stillness before the private service began.
None of us would have wanted to be here today having this kind of service, but the focus of today is Bobbi-Anne herself and just the number of people that have gathered to express their thanksgiving and love for her and all that she means to everyone is a real testimony to the kind of person that she was. And we want to focus on her today and all that she means to everybody who's come and indeed to the whole city of Plymouth.
Inside the church, Bobbi-Anne's favourite music was played. Songs included the hit Iris by American band the Goo Goo Dolls and a track by the rapper Puff Daddy. Another spontaneous round of applause broke out as Bobby's coffin was taken away for the final time. People clearly visibly shaken on this most difficult of days. Back in Leigham, fresh flowers and a fitting reminder of the young girl whose name will live on in Plymouth's memory.